So today I thought I'd review a video called Beethoven. It's an animated music video by King Science. The channel that's the video belongs to is Kyle Exum. Who has 3.7 million views. And the video that I'm talking about today, it's animated, because it's animated name. But animation music videos, they're either pretty good or they're awful. Were genuinely awful. This is one that it's like it almost makes it to being good, but the thing that holds it back is also the reason that people will probably click on it in the first place, which is that it's animated. Now, King Science, I don't know much about him, the animator who did it. I don't really care about the channel that belongs to because I'm only an animation channel. But King Science, I only know of them from the Daft Peanut review, like Young Don the Sauce God. That's where I know it from. Where it's like a video that's critiquing King Science about his review on Young Don, but it also critiques Young Don a little bit. But that's how I know him from. So my opinion of him is not going to be that high because he's got kind of an ego. I mean, I have a tiny bit of an ego over my animation, but it's not enough to where I don't take critique. Like I know I'm fairly decent at animation. I'm not a professional in any way, shape, or form. I'm self-taught, so I don't really see myself actually being a professional. But I'm still a better animator than King Science or Young Don the Sauce God, or on the odd ones out because he doesn't really animate, despite the fact he loves to call himself a storytime animator. But anyways, on to the review. So the first part I'd like to talk about is the music video part. I felt the rap was good. The beat was pretty decent. There was only a few areas where I thought it needed work. That was the reason I put a like on the video. It had nothing to do with the animation. Now onto the animation, which is the part I really care about. So right off the bat, in the very beginning of the video, I would say this is actually pretty. It has an example of very well done animation on the right and very poor animation done on the left. So on the right, the reason that the one area looks so well done is because he probably knows someone that has a piano, King Science, and he knows how to play or he had them play as he probably took video and then probably just traced over it. That's exactly what that looks like to me, which is why it's so clean compared to the rest of everything in the video. But on the left side is where we see it's not really like poor animation because it's animated and it looks fine, I suppose, but it's lazy because the character like Kyle looks out from the curtain, but he doesn't even do anything as basic as a blink. He just has the same exact fearful expression on his face, and you'll see that that's an issue for the remainder of this video in the next second. Okay, so what I would like to talk about first with this scene is the tone, because the rap is about, I'm just making a generalization here about what I think the rap is about, but, just telling the haters that they can just deal with it and he's talented and stuff like that. And he is talented, Kyle, because this was really, really decent. Like the animation wasn't, but the music video itself, like the video, like the song and everything, was actually pretty well done. So the rap, I guess, is trying to convey that haters just deal with it. Made classic hits that went pop, stuff like that. Death the hater won't stop. But then if you look at the character, they're like, if you look at them, they look like they're huddled and they're scared. Like his face, it's even more apparent when they do the zoom in. It doesn't look like he's like squinting in such a way like he's like peering out at all the haters or whatever he's doing, or like he's glaring at them or something like that. Like you would think, if he's talking about haters just dealing with their hate of him. It looks like he's like worried. from just the way the eyebrows are furred. And oh my god, this art style hurts my soul. Okay, so another thing I would like to talk about is at the very beginning when the shot opens up and it shows the full character, his proportions are entirely off. So like the bottom of the character, the legs look like an Odds One Outs clone, and then the top is, I don't even know how to describe it. First off, the head is like twice. It's about probably the size of the chest. Uh, the proportions are just completely screwed up. The arms themselves are like probably one, like close to like one third, something like that, uh, taller than the rest of the body. I don't know how to describe it. Like they don't match. The arms are too long. Is what I'm trying to say. The arms are too long. The head's too big. The legs are too like blocky. The torso itself is also extremely long. Um, I don't know how long King Science has actually been animating or working with art, but he really should have looked at this and had someone else look over it and tell him these are the issues with your proportion in your drawing because it looks genuinely terrible. But the lip syncing, I will say, is actually pretty good. And the shading when it comes up close to the character. But besides that, this entire scene is a complete train wreck with tone, proportions, and just a basic thing of a facial expression you just can't do apparently. And then in this scene, it zooms out to show like doesn't zoom out. It just kind of like swaps perspective to the showing the audience, and the audience is so barely animated they don't even move. They do barely. They're just they have mouths open, and they don't blink. They don't like gasp. They just don't even twitch an eye. It's just a stock like photo basically. And then it goes to show him pointing down at the audience. Well, I'm kind of impressed on how he had to have done like a character sheet or something for this character because he's still proportioned weirdly, but he's on proportion with the off proportions, if that makes sense. Like the character like was made on a character sheet and the character sheet was wrong. So now the character is drawn wrong, but he's on model for being drawn wrong. And then, of course, he can do a basic pose. So he had to use a smear frame. It's kind of, and then he adds a little point at the end for the finger because God forbid he actually like have the finger itself like extend from like a closed fist into a pointing finger pose. That's just too much work. Despite the fact he could spend like the 0.1 nanosecond it took to actually animate the pose. It's just lazy. And then there's a one like little like frame where like the character's speaking, and I don't know how to describe it other than it looks like there's spit coming out of his mouth, but it's not blue. It's just a white. I'm assuming that's where he messed up, and it's going so fast. Unless you like scroll through the video, you're not gonna find it. But I found it because I'm doing a review of this, and I have to say, why is that there? He had to have like played this video back several times, so I'm just confused as to why he left that little bit in there. Because I found it, which means it was noticed by at least some people. And then right before it shows the guy in the wig giving him a thumbs up, the character opens their mouth and it transitions into the other scene, but it just looks like that's an animation frame or a couple that were just kind of like thrown in there. And it really messes it up with the transition because the character should just be in that one pose, but instead they kind of force the character's perspective back a little bit so you see a little bit more of his torso. And with his mouth open, it just looks really weird. I don't know why they kept that part in there. They didn't, like just delete it after having to pan through the video, I'm assuming dozens of times because he had to have animated this, which means he had to have played it. I think played it through, and then it actually shows the audience move, which I applaud him for that. There's at least some work he put into the characters there. But then once it zooms out and shows the audience, so like you see the very back of the characters' heads, um, and for like the shot where it's showing all of the audience and then him, and then for everyone else besides those back people, all you see is a bunch of like I want to go with purple blobs. So the audience is a bunch of purple blobs and like 6 actual people in the very back. And the background was very terribly traced. I'm assuming they looked up some sort of theater or something and then kind of traced over that. Well, they did a poor job. They did a terrible job. See, what I use is I can't animate backgrounds. I can animate backgrounds, but I don't do backgrounds. So, because I'm a character animator for my own series on YouTube, on my channel, and I hire this one artist to do my backgrounds. He does basically what happens is I do the shots, the very basic outlines of the environments that I create in Blender, and then I will just have them there, and then I will bring them up to the artist that I pay to do my backgrounds for my animated scenes, and then they will go in and actually add in detail, which makes it a lot more lively and feel like a much more living world. I don't know what didn't stop Kyle or King Science from either of them from doing this with this animation, because it's only an hour. It's only a minute, and my series, the first episode, is going to have 4 minutes. So, I mean, if I can pay someone to do backgrounds, I don't see why they couldn't too. Despite that, considering the fact they probably have a lot more money in this project than I do in mine. And then we go back to the I'm frightened of my surroundings pose with the all blank red background. See, that's the part that really confuses me. If they could do backgrounds for the one area of the audience being shown, I really don't. That really like annoys me because you're just tapping out. You're just like, I give up. I'm not gonna do anymore. When like adding a background would be like the easiest thing if he could find someone to do backgrounds, which he could. It's not like it's difficult. I did it, and I have like what 52 subscribers. So what's stopping King Science from being able to find a background animator? I'm pretty sure Kyle would be pretty okay with having a second background artist. It's only a minute of animation. They could just reuse the backgrounds instead of you just having a blank red just wall of nothing where the characters sat upon. It's really funny because it switches from it all he did was zoom in to the character's mouth because he's got the facial movements all mapped out because again it's like it's not like it's this animation is difficult for him to do. I could do this animation with like half my brain. It's not hard. His character's not moving at all. Like for me to do this exact scene, which I have a couple in my first episode, like it probably takes me, I don't know, maybe 4 hours to do probably 200 frames of this type of animation. So King Science probably like did not do much work to get out this video, the animation half for Kyle's video. If I was Kyle, I'd be like, could you come back to me with something a lot better than this? Or I would go find a better animator because this is very poorly animated. Like this scene itself takes no effort to do because once you have the pose, the very poorly proportioned pose, you don't really need to do anything except mouth movements. And his character, unlike my characters, doesn't have to worry about his mouth having to open. With my characters, the mouth actually tends to open, like the jaw unhinges. For a decent amount of them, some they kind of do the mouth shape thing, but the mouth still like opens and you get to see like the inside of the inside of their mouth. You get to see the uh, lower jaw unhinge, and then the side of the cheek. So like it's not even like that's difficult really either. Um, and then the character doesn't even do basic stuff like blinking. Like I don't do blinking sometimes because it's like it's a minor and like detail, but in some areas it's needed just to give your character a little bit more, the fact that they're alive because you have to blink. Animated beings, I guess, have to blink too. They're trying to simulate reality. Um, but another issue I have is that, like, when he moves into the mouth movement, the mouth doesn't really do much more than the mouth was doing before. It doesn't gain any sort of like increased like I don't know what to call it other than like it's not any more not interactive. It's not any more um, like alive than it was before. It was just the character just singing in front of the fourth wall. Like we usually when characters like move in with their mouth movements, you tend to see a lot more dynamic. Like you tend to see a lot more teeth. You tend to see a lot more like saliva, the tongue, the cheeks moving, things like that. Such it's a lot more visceral. It's really more for when a character's trying to either like the lips tend to like purse or like stand outness, something like that, something along those lines. It's really good for like an animal character that's like if you're going very like bestial or something like that, or like a character that's very dramatic. But here it doesn't really work because again, it's like maybe 4 frames of animation all being replayed over and over, and it doesn't have any sort of impact to the scene. All you did was like bring the camera closer to an animation that was already pretty well worn its lifespan from the very beginning of the video for you to come back and reuse it again. So I feel like that's a very poor choice of editing on King Science's part again. So this next part I'd like to talk about is like it shows Kyle holding up a shirt, but then instead of there being like an in between for like 1 frame, it shows the character like the arm is moving out from behind the code, and then in the very next split second, which you're not supposed to do in animation, by the way, it just like the arm is just like directly where it was, like where it would be at the end pose. There was no in betweens. There wasn't even like a smear frame like you did for the previous shot. It was nothing. It was just like the arm is here, and it magically teleports to being just showing off the shirt, and then the shirt pops for some reason. I don't know why storytimers do this. I feel like it's like some sort of like stylistic choice, or like to make the character feel more alive. But if I'm being honest, the character would feel more alive if it was animated more, and I'm not seeing that happening in this scene. The shirt just expands in size for no reason, and then after that, uh, it transitions to a second shot of it's showing the audience, and he's pointing out to the crowd. He's pointing out to George Washington. But what I don't understand is this shot looks so much better than the first audience shot, where it showed off just a bunch of purple blobs from that very back away scene of the audience, where we would only be able to show their heads. Um, the silhouettes, the characters in this shot, are actual silhouettes of characters. I don't know why you couldn't do that for the previous scene. It'd make it look so much better than it was if he had just done the exact same thing he did for this shot. And then the characters in this shot look so much more like alive. They look much better. Like there's more like details put into them. I'm assuming these are OCs of someone's. I'm not entirely sure, but it's someone. I wish the rest of the characters in the audience were drawn like this because they look so much better. Um, and then it transitions from this scene to what I would say is a much better pose. Um, the character doesn't move or anything. Like the arm doesn't bend out to show the microwave to show the microphone like coming into frame or anything dynamic like that. That'd be too hard. Of course, it's all got to be mouth movements or it's nothing. But then the character, like he looks like he's glaring, which I'm assuming is what he was trying to go for the previous poses when he would show the character, and he would be, rapping. But within this pose, in this specific one, you can tell like he's like in a like pose that basically is like standoffish, like he's glaring. His arm is like up at his side with the microphone, and he's got a finger pointing at the microphone. So like that's a good pose. But the issue is that he didn't do this for all the other ones. This is a one-time like pose near like the end, like halfway point or near the end of the video. So it feels kind of lost. It feels like a waste opportunity that he could have just used this pose instead of the other one. That looked terrible. Um, and then in the next shot, I don't know what it is with his posing. It's awful. So like for this one little scene, I don't even think it shows up for the rest of the video. But like the character, he's holding the microphone to his eyeball, and then his arm is, I don't know what to describe his arm as doing other than it's making the very suggestive motion. Um, but the arm is also poorly drawn. It's a rubber hose arm for a character that's supposed to have like actual proportions. Um, yeah, so it's just a dull pose in general. It's lifeless. It's nothing. Um, and then of the one area I will give credit for is this really unique shot of him having like microphones in and uh, deflecting the hate and fakes with it. I would say that's a pretty good shot. I would think it'd be much better if like I don't know, his ears like popped in a scene, or like he put that you like had a shot of the fingers coming in, a hand coming in to put the microphone in before the word fakes and hate showed up. I think that'd be a lot more dynamic. Then it goes into this exact same pose again with that has terrible posing with the eyeball up to the face, and then it actually has a dynamic scene in the very next shot. I will commend him for this, um, where he like bends down and he, I guess, shows off his shoes. But like another thing about the anatomy is that it like I feel like it changed again. Like the legs have to be extremely long if the belt to tie up the torso is up that high, and then the arms are somehow short again, but still off. The head's still overly sized, and his shoes. It looks so blocky. Oh my god, it's so awful. And then another thing is that because a lot of my characters in my series wear like coats and things, so like when they bend or something, the coat has to move along with them. Well, apparently the knees are like maybe 1/5 the proportion ratio of the body, and then uh, what? And then like the rest of his like his hips have to make up the majority of his body in this one shot. Otherwise, I don't know how to explain the anatomy I'm seeing. But then it actually shows a. I don't know why, but it's a really, I guess, decently shaded and lightened scene of the Napoleon One shoes that he's wearing. But the issue still is that the legs don't look like legs. They look like tubes, like really long tubes strapped to his feet. So it just seems kind of like to cover up his feet. So it would be a well done uh, frame of its animation. It'd just be like of a still picture. If only for the fact that the anatomy is completely like messed up beyond recognition. And then it goes into a pose where it not pose. It does do a scene where it shows him riding a horse. So I've got horses in my series, and this one looks awful. Um, I mean, I'm not going to say the background characters in my series look all that decent, but they still look decent than any of the stuff that he's put out. Um, so like, and then like this is probably the most like uh, proportioned of his characters seems to like win out. This is the only time, and then but I don't understand um, why his head is still so big because it looks off with the art style is going for. So if you have an art style where like this character has like a really like kind of um, fat face with like barely any detail, you kind of want your characters to be proportioned to like in proportion with the head. Um, but that's not how this character is at all. So like the rest of him looks like it was um, like made from like some scene of someone rearing up on a horse with like actual proportions, and then he just kind of copied that. That's all. That's the most I can tell from how decent. I'm not gonna call it decent. From how okay the animation is. Um, and one thing I will say is that so like when the horse itself it needs to be put down because its legs are like bending in like the wrong places. Um, First off, its face is a tube. It's not a tube. We're not supposed to have tubes for faces. Um, its head looks like a cannon. It's weird. Um, and then they also don't have fur like that really. That goes down the very front of the chest. I'm just nitpicking at this point, but I just want to. So sorry, I'll have to deal with that. And then like the knees of it are like really too far down. It would if it moved, it would look like he was walking on its tippy toes, but it would be walking like a normal horse. So it would look like some sort of like mutant horse. And then the knees are like, again, they're not supporting that body weight of the horse. They're just kind of like jutting out in weird places, and they look like they're broken. Um, but when he shows the horse getting animated, it rears like it doesn't bend down really. More of it kind of lurches its giant neck forward like a giraffe, and then its knees also are even more broken because it's bending down with the entirety of its body weight and it's spurring it only by its knees. And I don't know if you've seen a horse do that, but they're probably dying when they do something like this. So, like, the horse is like acting like, I don't know, like a spring toy, and then it rears back, and then it shows a decent, like I'm assuming the decent posing of the horse they actually like trace this from, because the legs actually become like that of a normal horse. But that's like the only shot, and it looks awful. Um, but then I will say the one good part is that it's not the legs how they move, because they move really oddly. Although they do rotate, so will give him props for that. But it's not the one part I do like is that the hair kind of moves down, but that's like the only thing I'm going to give him credit for. I mean, the tail itself doesn't even move like back and forth like it would. It's just an okay scene for a terrible animation. And okay, so this is a trick you can always use when you're animating a walk cycle. If it doesn't show the character's legs, it makes it so much easier. So, like in this one scene, I had a character who was moving with another character in the very beginning of the episode one, and I had to simulate that the one character whose legs were showing, like I didn't have to worry about them, but the one character that's legs weren't showing, one of my main characters, I had to show him walking with that exact same character. Um, so basically, you have to move the character up and down in such a way to where it looks like they're walking. Which, if he was skilled and actually spent time animating instead of like blowing smoke up his own ass, like he would probably know how to do a simple wax cycle, but you see, he can't do that. But then, like his character, he has Kyle move and like I don't know how to describe it. But, like he makes him kind of like hop in place. Uh, Again, it's the exact same pose that he had for like the previous frame, so he doesn't really have to do anything other than copy paste it and then just kind of move the character without actually having to move the character. So like if he moved, his arms would be moving and it would be rotating slightly, but that's just too much work, I suppose. But he does make the arm come up, which it looks terrible. The only thing I'll say for it is that it has. Nope, I can't say anything decent about it. It looks genuinely awful. It's only there for a couple seconds. I don't know why he added it in. But he does make the character bend when it comes in. So that's like the only thing I can give him credit for. But even then, that's not much because all you do is rotate the character like a couple degrees, and then boom, he's got him bending down, I suppose. But let's get to the part of the video that I really wanted to talk about. This is the part that made me want to do this video in the very beginning. So like, it's so bad. It goes out and it shows his character walking. Because it's on the lyric, you ain't toe to toe with Tobin. It shows him hopping up and down. The arms don't move; they're poorly drawn. The rest of the character moves, and it's bouncy enough, but it's still terrible. Oh my gosh, this is awful. Because the character is still proportioned weird, where he has this giant matchstick head on top of a very lanky body. So it looks like his head's going to collapse any minute from just the sheer weight of it. Uh, that's big brain. That's really big brain. But I mean, like, at least the character, like, is capable of doing things like jumping up and down. So he does have that ability to animate. King Science does. He doesn't have the ability to animate any sort of expressions though, because the character still is doing basic mouth movements. He's looking blankly at the screen. He couldn't even be bothered to add in like an expression of him like glaring or something. But one thing I will say is that it doesn't really match with the scene in any sort of way because it it has, what is the point of it? It doesn't go with the animation. If anything, it would be much better off if he was like doing the toe to toe thing instead of his arms like being out at his side, like he's about to like do the chicken dance. Like you could have him like bringing his arms up so that way he's punching towards the camera, so it'd still be dynamic, and you probably still wouldn't have to animate that much. But the character would, at the very least, it would like fit the scene you're going for. But he's not even doing that. And then my favorite part is when the character does, get this, a character turnaround. Oh, it's glorious. Look at that. Look at that. It looks so bad. Oh god, that looks awful. Okay, so let's dig into this. So he does have the rotation right to an extent. which I'm assuming what he did was because you get reference animation all the time. I have to use it sometimes just to like get the feel of how a character would move. But I'm assuming what he did was he performed these actions over video, and then he kind of just animated over it, which is why the character actually has things like leg proportions and arms that move up and down. Again, his face, it doesn't move. His head rotates almost at a perfect 360 degrees, which if it's a character turnaround, that's somewhat fine because he's trying to show someone that you know how to draw this character in 360 degree rotations. But the issue with that is that this is not a character rotation. This is a music video. You're trying to make this character look dynamic. What doesn't look dynamic is the fact that his face rotates in a perfect 360 degrees almost. Like it does shrink in size to show off that the character is moving backwards in space. So I will give him props on that basic aspect, but it doesn't do anything else. The head doesn't move down as you're turning 360 degrees, or it doesn't go up in any way because he doesn't know how to animate heads going down or heads going up. I don't even think you could with this character. It's so terribly drawn. It's not terrible to look at, I suppose, but it's genuinely terribly, like, proportionally, it's awful. Like Steven Universe, Gumball, these characters have much more stylized, but they still manage to like make the character look like they fit with their like how they're supposed to in the world, if that makes sense. Like this isn't stylized in any sort of way. This is merely him not knowing how to do proportions. I can tell because I just like look at it. Because if he knew how to do proportions, this character would not be this tall with that big of a head. But anyways, and then back to the character turnaround. The arms don't move. They move again, like, almost a perfect 360 degrees until about when he is staring as the audience would stare. So he's staring backwards at the wall of red, black, shadow, whatever it is. But then the arms do come up. He then transitions into looks like another turn, but he does it so oddly. He kind of slides. His leg doesn't slide out. So like if you were doing a sliding movement, your leg would slide away from you unless you're pulling it back. But he doesn't pull it back. The character just rotates on the leg like perfectly. So like he goes from being in one area and then his leg stays firmly in place, like it's bolted to the ground. But then the rest of him does just moves to the right perfectly. It looks very mechanical because all he had to do was copy the image of, I'm assuming, not the leg, so the rest of the character, and then move it to the right a couple spaces, and then animate that. That's all he had to do. And it looks genuinely terrible. So then the character starts to do like these like arm movements, and they look decent, but again, it's because he traced over it. But then the face itself has that same blank, like wide-eyed stare, like he doesn't know what's going on, like he's being controlled by some outside force. But then the hands themselves, because I've already talked about the feet, the arms themselves get so much bigger than the rest of the body, and it's very noticeable especially when it's in motion. You can just look at it and tell. So for this next part, it's probably going to be the only part where I see the animation looks okay. So his, I will say that when it shows the Amazon Prime Pigeon, and it's cute. It's very stylized. That actually works out pretty well. I like how he did this. It looks very well done. The thing is that when the scene where it says, I ain't got the time, message Pigeon Prime when it shows the guy asking for the time. That actually was pretty well done itself. Even though there's not really much in the way of animation, that's kind of just motion twins. But then it shows the auditorium, and while there is nothing animated in the scene, it does look decent for his art ability, I suppose. It does look like it's filled with a bunch of Odd Ones Out clones because of how their characters proportion, but I mean, it's fine. It's like below subpar, which for him is good. For him, it's good. But when I go, I mean, the lighting's everywhere. It's off, but it's fine. Whenever they trace this from, they probably done a better job of tracing it from whatever picture they happen to get it from, but it's fine. This next part is I'm probably going to say the best animation in this entire music video, but that's not saying much. So obviously, again, he had someone he traced over a video of someone making these movements with their body, but he didn't do a good enough job. So the hands are decent enough. They move pretty well, again, because he traced over it. But the issue I have with this main area of the animation has to be the head, because the head goes everywhere. He does somehow gain the ability to make a character expressive throughout this entire animation, which I have to applaud him for. That's very well done. I'm glad he finally gained this skill over the course of the entire 1 minute of animation. But the issue I have with the head is that it moves like it's a sack full of fluid, because it gains mass in areas where it shouldn't. So like the chin goes everywhere. It moves so it gains mass, decreases, becomes fat, it becomes short, like throughout the entirety of the animation. So he just kind of I'm assuming, made points of where the mouth and nose were and eyes to some degree, and he just kind of inputted the character animation on top of that, because that's why it looks so weird. The head also does the exact same thing, kind of squishes and squashes, but not in a way that's skilled, like that he meant to do that. It's just because he doesn't know how to trace it very properly and animate it. He didn't use any arcs really, because the head, again, it moves in very odd ways. And the eyes also space apart. The very end is the weirdest part, because the character kind of holds on that frame. I don't know why they didn't cut this bit, because it really needed to be cut. So the character holds on a pose where he's holding his clenched hand up with a mic near his mouth, but then it just kind of stays in that pose for just a second too long. And the character's face, it's still moving even after. If he just kept it on this one frame at the very end of the movements, the main movements, it would have been fine. But King Science apparently thinks that's not enough. The character still keeps moving, but the head wobbles throughout the entirety of that resting pose. I don't know why he decided to keep animating, but he should have stopped, which is funny enough for me to say someone that's an animator. The next shot is fine. I don't see anything really wrong with it aside the. Actually, no. You know what? The proportions are actually pretty okay in this. I mean, that's just because the character's not really moving, and unfortunately, I feel like he had messed up drawing him from the character sheet, so it actually looks somewhat better. But then they do a walk cycle up to a car that you can tell is traced. I don't know what to call it. It looks like a whatever car that was from Back to the Future. But then they had filmed themselves walking to the car, and then they get in the car. But then the characters' faces are so oddly shaped in it. I don't know why they held on this pose. They could have just showed the doors closing as soon as they got in the car, instead of that second where kind of the car bounces up and down, and then that would have made it look a lot less weird than it does, because it does look very weird. And then it goes to a frame that shows him. It's traced, but it's traced weird because the arm is still in a rubber hose, and it kind of like lurks its way forward. It gains somehow. It manages to gain a couple extra like inches. Like the arm itself stretches to gain inches. Instead of pulling forward, it literally like goes back and extends itself out for him to reach the pedal and then move it back. And then it goes to a shot of the exhaust, which does look pretty okay, but I feel like it's just because they had filmed it on like a dirt road or something, and the dust billowing out. And then for some reason, it transitions back from the scene where it has the dust to a scene with the car, just by the car itself. There's no animated dust, which they could have done because they did it before. And then it just kind of is just stationary and is void of some kind. And then they just rip off Back to the Future. That's all that happens. Just rip off Back to the Future so hard with the lines of flames and everything. They literally just watch the movie and trace over it. And then it does some psychedelic stuff. The windshield animation wasn't too bad. Again, like for some reason, King Science's character is animated like it's proportioned so much better than Kyle's. And you can just look at them and you can see that one's proportioned better. I don't know if that's just because of the pose he has it in. I mean, the arms are still messed up, but it still looks better than Kyle's. King Science's looks so much better than Kyle's because Kyle's looks like you extended him and then lengthened him out like he's a piece of spaghetti. And then again, no expressions on their faces. And then the rest of the video is almost just this entire like terribly done trace over of the car. I'm assuming what they had done is probably gotten a model car of some kind and kind of twisted it, turned it. But again, the issue with this is that it serves no purpose. It does nothing for the scene. It means nothing to it. All we make are masterpieces for releases. The irony of that when it comes to this music video is astonishing. Kyle's music in this was actually pretty okay. It was actually pretty decent, but King Science's was awful. So like the rest of this is basically just the car being flipped on its side, and that's literally about it. I guess they spent out their animation budget, except for that one bit where it turns perfectly. I don't know why they added this bit into the music video. What does this have to do with Beethoven or Beethoven? It serves no rhyme or reason. I don't know why they added this in. It doesn't do anything for this video. It's utter nonsense. It's a fever dream at the end of a well-structured video. Let's knock it out of hand here. It's not really well structured, but it at least has a theme. Like he's in front of an audience. He's not in front of an audience anymore with this. I don't even know what's going on. I don't even know why they added this in here. It's just there, just to be there, and just because they thought it would be cool, I guess, to copy Back to the Future from like a 1-to-1. And then the very last bit is him, he's just talking. I do like how it shows when it's the line made viral hits before Vine. It shows Vine. But then again, that's not really that difficult to animate. So I'm not going to give him credit for that. Both songs ahead of your time. Characters in the stock pose for some reason. And it's still poorly drawn. I don't know how that manages to do that. The arm is cut off from the rest of the body. The one that's pointing down at the child, that's an ugly baby. Came into the future, y'all still behind. Which, this is a decent reference, if only you forget the fact that they just traced over the scene from Back to the Future. Like, a reference tends to be its own thing. This is not its own thing. This is just a trace, basically. And then another thing is that he's somehow back in the car again. Had to use a feathered pen to write bars as fly. But why is he in a car? And why is it not moving? I mean, there's speed lines like it's moving, but it's not moving. It's not doing anything. It's just in a black void where it's stationary, but he's somehow still able to talk. And then my favorite part is this very end piece where it's like me, Mozart got beef, his wig dry, where like he's rotating for some reason. His coat is like billowing up like he's Mary Poppins, and then he's just rotating in a perfect 360 degrees for some flippin' reason. I have no idea. And then he, like it's a magical girl transformation, like he's Sailor Moon, transitions into his street clothing and then drops. And that's it, really. Except for this one last bit where he does a very poorly done 360-degree rotation to show off the not audience of Purple Blobs again. And the poorly traced, wow, this scene is poorly traced. Like you can see the lines in the back that are like, that they're not finished. They're just a bunch of scribbles. Like where that orange bit is, that's where like you would exit from, but there's nothing there. He just gave up. And then it shows another scene of the probably one of the only decently animated scenes in this entire thing. Yeah, it just kind of ends that, except for some speakers that are animated, which I'm sure King Science got that from like every other cartoon that has speakers in it, like Ed, Edd n Eddy or anything else. It's not ending. Why is it not ending? So then they're somehow back to the scene of him like with that terrible pose, except he's in his street clothes now. They just reused it, just gave him a different thing of clothing. The arm is still messed up. His eye is somehow even more shoved in his face than before. But he does have correct proportions now, which is very odd, because for the most part of the video, he hasn't even had that. The mouth movement, which means nothing, because again, it's not dynamic in any sort of way, and then the piano. That's it. This was awful. I did not enjoy it, except for the music part of the video. The animation was dog shit. But no, that's just my opinion. Science, if you happen to see this, you can't animate very well at all. But it's okay. You can learn. I was just like looking up videos of like how people like learn to draw and then just following that. If anyone dislikes this video, I will know it from my analytics, but you will all not know it. So yeah, have fun with that. I mean, I would like if the dislike bar was still back, but not much that can be done about that. Anyways, thank you all for listening to my little review. Bye.